Good morning, Director Wray. I'd like to take you back to 2021. In many parts of the country, schools remained closed month after month for no good reason. Once schools did nominally open, many instituted draconian testing and quarantine regimes, such as one student is possibly exposed to COVID, everyone goes home for the week. Children as young as toddlers were subjected to harmful mask mandates that defied international norms. The way some students were treated truly shocks the conscience. Just consider a few examples from my own state of California. A school district in Davis sent an email to parents announcing that their children will be required to eat outside in the rain to reduce exposure to COVID. A school in Sonoma County made young children chew with their masks on, explaining this was to minimize the time spent unmasked. Some schools in Los Angeles limited students to one bathroom break per day and barred them from drinking water outside of the lunch period. A school in the San Ramon Valley made students eat lunch on the ground. In October of that year, the American Academy of Pediatrics would declare a national state of emergency in children's mental health, citing dramatic increases in emergency department visits for all mental health emergencies, including suspected suicide attempts. In the face of this, Director, the Biden administration decided to take action. It mobilized the sweeping powers of federal law enforcement. But it wasn't to spare kids from such cruelty. Rather, it was to target the parents who were speaking out against it. The administration coordinated with the National School Board Association on a letter that began with the alarming claim America's public schools and its education leaders are under an immediate threat. The letter cited a handful of news stories, almost all of which involved purely expressive activity by parents at school board meetings, and called such activity a form of domestic terrorism. The letter called for the full counterterrorism and law enforcement powers of the federal government, including authority granted under the Patriot Act, to be mobilized to investigate, intercept, and prevent such activity. The Biden administration was ready to take this letter and run with it the moment it was received. After all, administration officials had participated in its drafting. Within 5 days of receiving it, Attorney General Merrick Garland fired off his infamous memo directing federal action in response to a, quote, disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff. In response, the FBI opened 25 assessments against parents and even created a new threat tag. Director Wray, did Attorney General Garland consult with you or the FBI before issuing that memorandum?
I can't get into discussions that did, or maybe more importantly, did not happen between the FBI and the department in advance of the...
Why do you say more importantly did not?
Well, because I will say to you the same thing that I said to all 56 of our field offices as soon as I read the memo, which is that the FBI is not in the business of investigating or policing speech at school board meetings or anywhere else for that matter, and we're not going to start now. Now, violence... Threats of violence, that's a different matter. We're going to work with our state.
Right, so that's what the memo was predicated on. And what I'm asking you, was there any evidence that you provided to Attorney General Garland that supported that predicate, that premise that there was an increase in harassment and threats of violence?
I'm not aware of any such evidence, but I know that we've had a number of our folks who have been up here for transcribed interviews. Mm-hmm. So unless some of them shared it, I'm not aware of any of that.
Well, actually, what they've shared with us points to just the opposite. You had, for example, a letter from Christopher Dunham, acting assistant director in March of this year, where the FBI acknowledged that it has not observed an uptick of threats directed at school officials since it began tracking the data. Does that sound accurate to you?
Yes, sir.
And is it also true that, according to the FBI itself, none of the school board-related investigations have resulted in federal arrests or charges?
I think that's correct. I think of the 25, and for context, that's 25 tips.
I'm sorry, I have limited time, so if that's correct, I'd like to move on. This committee's investigation concluded that the Justice Department's own documents demonstrate that there was no compelling nationwide law enforcement justification for the Attorney General's directive. Do you have any reason to dispute that conclusion?
No.
So we had an investigation of parents. We had a sweeping mobilization of federal power against the most protected core First Amendment activity, the right of citizens to speak and petition their government on the most important of issues, the education of their children. And you are telling me that the entire basis for that, there was no evidence to support it.
Well, I want to be clear. We, the FBI, as I said, were not and did not investigate people for exercising.
Should Attorney General Garland rescind the memo?
I'm sorry?
Should Attorney General Garland rescind that memo?
Oh, that's a question for the Attorney General.
Do you believe he should?
Again, that's a question for the Attorney General.
Do you believe that the Attorney General should apologize to parents who are the subject of that memorandum?
I'm not going to speak to that.
Will you apologize for the FBI's own role?
I think the FBI conducted itself the way it should here, which is that we've continued to follow our longstanding rules and have not changed anything in response to that memo.
Time of the gentleman has expired.